Well, hey ceramic students, it's Mrs. New here. Today we're going to be going through the pottery wheel. So I'm going to be showing you the basics of how to throw a small bowl or vessel on the wheel. And I'm going to show you all the tools that you need and what you need to do to get ready for the wheel and the steps of basically centering and throwing. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing you need to do when you're going to throw on the wheel is make sure that you are signed up on the sign-up sheet for that day. And then if you have a partner, you and your partner will, at the beginning of class, get your supplies ready. So one of the things you need is one of these larger containers filled with some warm water. In that container, you want to have one of the small round sponges, okay? Make sure you are not using the teeny tiny yogurt dishes. Make sure you are using one of the larger containers here for your water because you will need it. Another thing you want to do is grab an apron. You also want to make sure that you don't have any long jewelry or lanyards that might hang down. You also want to be sure that you are wearing appropriate clothing, meaning that maybe you're not wearing a skirt that day, that you're not wearing a low-cut blouse because you will be leaning over. You also want to make sure your hair is tied back. So if you have long hair, that it's pulled back off your face. Again, those are just some safety things to consider. Another thing you want to have is a bat. So a bat is kind of a fancy word for a board. It has two holes in it, and the bat fits onto the wheel head, and there are two pegs on the wheel head, and that's where the bat fits down. So the bats are kept kind of behind here in one of these cabinets, so make sure you have a bat. Now some of the bats are slightly warped, meaning that they're a little wobbly. It's not the end of the world if you have a bat that's slightly warped. You can also throw directly onto the metal wheel head, but I prefer that you use a bat to kind of protect our wheels. The wheels that we have in class are only a few years old. They're called a whisper wheel, and they're very nice, and so we want to keep them nice. Another thing about your sign up for the wheel is that you will be signed off when you clean the wheel. So that is another part of this process, and I'll be taking you through the cleaning after I show you how to throw. So I'm going to go ahead and fit my bat down onto my wheel head. And sometimes you have to kind of push down on this a little bit. If for some reason it's not sticking, you could take just a tiny piece of clay, put it onto the peg, and then push the bat on top of it. Or put a little bit of clay underneath onto the metal wheel head and then push the bat down on top so that it kind of sticks. And then the other thing you're going to need is at least 3 pieces of clay. So when you have a partner, one of you is going to start, but your pieces of clay want to be about the size of your fist. So everyone has different size hands. Some people have very large hands. They can start with a bigger piece, but look at the size of your fist, and the piece of your clay should be no bigger than that. About that size is good. You want to get your piece of clay round on the bottom and in kind of a cone shape. So hopefully you can see that. So the way that I did that is I took my clay, I rolled it like this to try to make a cone shape, and then on the bottom I rolled it like this to get it rounded on the bottom. And what that's going to do is when I put this onto the wheel head, it kind of creates sort of a suction cup and helps that stick to the wheel. So once I get 3 lugs of clay that are kind of that shape, then I'm ready to start. So step 1 is going to be to attach the clay to the bat or the wheel head. So what I'm going to do is kind of look straight down. I also need to pull myself up a little bit and make sure that I am up close to the wheel so that when I lean over, my nose is directly in the center of that wheel. I don't want to be way back here and trying to throw. I need to be up close, okay? And then if I'm looking straight at the middle, I'm going to take my clay, I'm going to kind of aim and give it a good smack. In fact, you could even give it a pat-pat afterwards, okay? So one of the things that's kind of difficult when you're first throwing is sometimes when you start moving the wheel, this piece of clay will start sliding around. If that starts to happen, you need to stop the wheel, you need to take the clay, off of there, dry it off, and then try to reattach it, okay? It actually sticks better when the bat is slightly dry and when you have that nice round bottom. But you cannot throw if this piece of clay is sliding around, okay? Now, I have a pedal on this side of my foot, and this is how I drive the wheel. So if I push my toe down, that means go. If I put my heel down, it means stop. So it's the same as like driving a car, okay? If you are left-handed, your wheel will go the opposite direction. So if you're left-handed, please come see me and I will switch your wheel direction to make sure it's going the proper way. Otherwise, all the wheels are set for right-handed people. If you are right-handed, then the wheel should be turning counterclockwise. If you're left-handed, the wheel will turn clockwise. So if you're left-handed, just come check with me and make sure your wheel's going the right direction. So my first step in, getting this clay going is what's called centering. I need to make sure my clay is centered before I can make anything. So the hand position for centering is that my left hand, assuming I'm right-handed, is going to be a cup like this, and my right hand is up on top like this. So it's kind of a cup, and I'm using this part of my bone right here, and my fist on top, and I'm pushing in and down, okay? The other thing is I'm going to anchor my elbows into my knees. So that way I'm bracing, my whole body is kind of still. And what I'm trying to do is get that clay to hold still, okay? So that it's not moving me around like this. If my elbows are up here, there's no way I can center. That clay is going to move me around. So that's why it's really important to lean over, lean into it, anchor your elbows. You're going to be pushing in and down. Now the other thing I'm going to do is on my fist hand that's on the top, I'm going to have my little sponge in that hand. And that way I can push on that sponge and add more water as I need to. What I don't want to do is take a whole bunch of water and put it on there like that. It doesn't take very much water to let that clay glide between your fingers. In fact, the way that I'm going to start is just to get my hands wet in the water. Okay, that's plenty. I've got my little sponge here. I can add more water if I need to by pressing on it. And then I'm just going to go ahead and press in and down, holding my elbows still, and I'm trying to center the clay. All right? So, my clay already moved on me a little bit, so let me try to get that back in center. There we go. So when you are centering, you actually want to go pretty fast. So if I look at my speeds here, if I push all the way down, maybe not that fast, but maybe just a little bit less than that. And what's nice is I can get my pedal at a certain speed, and then I can take my foot off the pedal and it remains at that speed. So that's kind of a nice feature of these wheels, okay? So you can see if I were just to not put any pressure on this, my fingers are moving, my arms are moving a little bit, but my goal is to hold this still. So I'm gonna go ahead and apply some pressure now. And I'm pushing in and I'm pushing down, okay? And you're not gonna be able to center in like 2 seconds. It takes a few minutes. Think of like a needle on a record, okay? That's kind of the same deal, or working on like a lathe in wood class. But if you hold your arms still for long enough, then eventually this little shape, right, this little cow pie will start to become centered, okay? And also when I'm pushing down, I'm using this part of my hand, which is connected to my bone, which is connected to my shoulder muscles. I'm really using all of my upper body strength here, being supported by my lower body and centering that clay. All right. Another way, if you're struggling with centering, you can do something called coning. So coning is where you take the clay up into a volcano shape and then you kind of push it back down on itself. So I will show you that. It's not necessary, but it is a method. So if I take my hands and I kind of pull them up together like this, and I'm using some strength of my hands here, you can see I got a little volcano shape, and now I can kind of make that fist and start from the middle and kind of push it down on itself. And so if you're struggling with getting your clay centered, you could try this coning method, but it's not necessary. So you will know your clay is centered when your hands and your arms are fairly still, all right? And once you're centered, be a little careful when you take your hands off the clay not to bump yourself off center, but mine feels pretty good. So again, this hand was pushing in, this hand was either like a karate chop you can do, or that fist, okay, that is the motion. And once I have my little cow pie and it's centered, my second step is gonna be what's called opening. So to open, I'm gonna be cupping the clay with these parts of my hands, and I'm gonna be taking my thumbs and driving my thumbs straight down into that clay. All right, so let me kind of show you what that looks like. Again, I'm gonna get my hands wet. I'm going to cup it with my hands, and then I take my thumbs, and right in the middle, I'm just going to start to drive them down into the center of the clay. Now the center of the clay is a little dry in there, so I'm going to add a little water with my sponge and then go down a little bit more. Now I don't want to go all the way down to the bat or to the wheel head. I want to just go a little bit so I can start to open up my little bowl. So centering, and now I'm opening. So I've got my hole there, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my thumbs and start to move them apart from each other a little bit and open up this little bowl, okay? So slowly, remember it's lots of revolutions of the wheel and slow movements of your hands. And one little movement there with my thumbs, and my bowl has gotten quite a bit wider now, okay? So I do have a little, like a little button there in the bottom, so I want to just flatten that out. And now I want to slow this down quite a bit, okay? I'm done with the centering, I'm done with the opening, so let's slow it down a little bit. And now the next step is called pulling up, okay, or pulling. And there's a couple ways you can do it. So one way that works really good for beginning students is to kind of make a claw like this, and you kind of bring that up like that. You're using kind of the side of your knuckle here and your thumb. Another way you can do it is actually to put one hand on the inside and one on the outside and kind of pull up the clay like that. So try some different things, see what works for you. I'm going to try that knuckle method. So I'm just going to make sure my hands are wet, and notice I'm bracing my hands together. So I don't have just one hand floating and one hand doing the work. Everything is together. I'm bracing my hands together, and I'm going slowly. Little movements, lots of revolutions of the wheel in order to make some big changes. So you can see just by pushing that like that, my bowl got a little bit taller. So I can do that again, right? That's called pulling. I can take my knuckle and my finger, and I'm just pinching them together a little bit, and I'm squeezing that clay in order to make that bowl just a little bit bigger and wider. So that's looking pretty good. Now let's try the other method where I put one hand on the inside and one hand on the outside, and I'm just going to slowly pull, kind of squeeze them together and pull up the walls of my bowl. And so that can come out and up just a little bit more. So you can see my bowl is getting quite a bit bigger. Each time I pull, it's getting bigger, but it's also getting thinner, right? And that clay is continuing to get wet. So I don't want to pull it too many times or mess with it too much, otherwise it can collapse. So that's one of the tips I have for you, is if you get something that looks pretty good and you're happy with it, just go ahead and stop while you're ahead, instead of continuing to, mess with it and add more water. And if you keep playing with it, sometimes it'll collapse on you. But I'm going to do one more pull just to see if I can kind of take a little bit of that clay from the bottom and pull it up towards the top. And sometimes when you do this process, your bowl gets a little off center. So I can feel I've got a little wiggle in my bowl, or like a wobble, but that's okay. It's fine. Okay. I'm going to take the sponge and compress the inside, and I'm also getting rid of all the standing water that's in there. And then I'm going to clean up my bat as well. And just like Miss New said, I'm going to stop while I'm ahead. So let me go ahead and take this off and kind of show you, I know it's kind of hard to see in the video, but kind of show you what I came up with here. My bat wants to stick. Okay, so here's what I've got. And that's pretty good, right? Especially for my first or second try. Now again, I've been throwing pottery for a while, so I can make this look easy. Your first beginning steps is just going to be trying to get centered, essentially. But once I get something that I'm pretty happy with, now I want to cut this off of the wheel head. So I'm going to grab a string tool and show you how to do that next. All right, so I went ahead and grabbed a towel and I just dried my hands off a little bit, or you can wash your hands and then dry them and come back. And then I have one of my string tools here, and I'm just going to hold it down to the wheel head, kind of like I was flossing my teeth. So really push it down to the wheel head. And you want to go straight and push down. If you go up like that, you can end up ripping the bottom of your bowl, right? The dish. So you want to push down with your thumbs, tight to the wheel head, and then I'm just going to pull this towards me and cut it off of the bat, okay? There, now it's off. And now with pretty dry hands, I'm going to carefully lift this up and transfer it to a wear board. And that does a couple things. Now I can put this in a bag and I can trim the bottom of it next time, which I have a different video on that. And then I can continue to just work on this bat. There's a little pad of clay that's left on my bat, and I'm not going to get rid of that. I'm going to leave that there. That will actually help my next piece of clay stick. So as long as it's not uneven, your little pad of clay, now I can just keep going. I've got my clay all ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and smack that down. I'm going to take you through the steps one more time, all right? So step one, centering, right? So one hand's pushing in, one hand is pushing down. Again, you can do the fist or the karate chop. You could kind of go straight. And I'm going to increase my speed. Okay, so one mistake is going too slow. If you go too slow, you can't get any of that sort of centripetal force that sort of helps you center. Okay, so go a little faster when you're centering. And go ahead and push in and down and try to get that little cow pie and make it so that your hands or your arms aren't wiggling too much. Okay, I'm going to gently release that. I don't want to do any jerk movements, right? I want everything to be very smooth, and I'm working kind of slowly, and I'm thinking about what I'm doing. Okay, next is centering, next is opening. So fingers straight down into the middle. Not like that, but almost like digging straight down, okay? Straight down into the center. Now, if you have really long fingernails, this unit is going to be a little bit more difficult for you. You might need to come see me about what to do. There are some ways to throw with long fingernails, but if we're talking like real long fingernails, then that might be a problem. Now I'm taking my thumbs and I'm opening them up. So I'm still cupping that clay, my hands are working together, and I'm just pulling my thumbs apart a little bit. One thing to be careful of, again, is not to drive your fingers too far down. Then you're going to end up with a donut with a hole in the center. So make sure you're leaving a little bit of clay on the bottom of your bowl. Okay? Next, I'm going to slow down my wheel. And then I'm going to do that kind of pincher grab. Okay? Pincher grab on the side. My hands are still working together. And I'm just taking kind of the side of my knuckle and my thumb, and I'm squeezing that clay just a little bit. I'm almost just holding my hands still and just kind of squeezing that in and up a little bit. I can do that one more time. So I'm trying to take a little bit of that clay from the bottom and lift it up towards the top. Now remember, your hands are always wet. If your hands get too dry, what can happen is the clay will stick to your hands and it will tear. So make sure you're kind of dipping your hands in the water and that your clay is gliding through your hands at all times, okay? You might need to add a little bit more water onto the bowl as well. Okay, so I've got that going pretty well. And now I'm just going to try to do that one where I kind of put one hand on the inside, one hand on the outside, and I pull up. Okay, pull up and kind of pull out. Because my goal here is to make a bowl, but I don't want it to be super thick. Right? I want it to be nice, a nice thickness. Okay? And then I can also use my sponge here. So let me take out some extra water, extra from the side. And that looks pretty good. So I'm going to stop while I'm ahead. I'm going to dry off my hands a little bit. And I'm going to cut this off of the wheel head. Remember, I'm going to take that clay, or that string tool, I'm sorry, and really push down and try not to lift up. Try to just go straight so that I don't wreck the bottom of my bowl. And I just saw a little bit of mud, so I'm going to clean up this bowl one more time with my sponge. The sponge is kind of important just to make sure there's no standing water in the bottom that can make your bowl crack. Okay, so kind of clean it up a little bit. Notice though that I did that while the wheel was turning. I wasn't taking my sponge and cat licking it while it's not turning. So while it's turning, just a little bit of sponge work, okay? And now I'm going to push this down, pull straight towards me, and with dry hands, I need a little bit more room on my wear board, so I got to move this guy over just a little bit. I can lift up gently and I can kind of even slide it to the edge of my bat if I need to. And then I can put this next to it, okay? And now both of these could go in a bag, on a board, and then I can trim them next time. Wheel throwing is really fun. It takes some practice. Your goal is to try throwing at least one time and at least 3 pieces of clay when you do your turn. Let's talk about cleaning up the wheel next. All right, guys, well, me and my partner are done with the wheel for today. And I want to talk about how to clean up the wheels that we have in class. So first of all, you need to clean your bat. You might have a small pad of clay on your bat. So there's a couple tools you can use to help you get that pad of clay off. So let me go grab that tool. So the tool that I'm going to use to scrape off either the wheel head or the bat is one of these plastic scrapers. And I'm just going to carefully, take off that little piece of clay there. And then I can go ahead and put this in the slop bucket or in the damp box to be recycled. Okay, and then for the bat itself, I can just take a big sponge right here on the wheel and just, wipe it down. If your bat is particularly dirty, then you can pop this off, take it to the sink, and wash it there. But if you don't have too much mess, like I don't have too much mess today, I might just be able to clean the wheel as is. Another thing I'm going to do with a damp sponge is wipe out the trough. Okay, so there's this kind of trough in here, and I'm going to get in here with my sponge, and I'm going to soak up any water and any debris as best I can with my sponge. And if I have chunks of clay, I'm going to take those out too, and I can just pop them into my little water bucket here. Now, when we're cleaning up, it's really important that we're not putting a lot of clay down our sinks. We do have a clay trap in our sink, but it's not perfect. So what I'm going to want you to do is take your container of water, squeeze out your sponge, get all your sponges aside, and then if there's any sediment, so any pieces of clay like this, you're going to fish them out, and I want you to put them in the big black garbage can, otherwise known as the slop bucket, okay, and not put them down the sink. Once you have all the chunks of clay out of your water container, then you can take this to the sink and dump it out, rinse your water container, and then just bring it back to the wheel and put it back where it was. The other thing I want you to do is if you have your string tool, again, you need to clean that up. So I'm going to take this, I can either go like this and kind of clean it, or if it's real dirty, rinse it off. And then I'm going to take my the front here of the wheel, and I'm going to sponge this all off too. Basically, I just want this wheel to look like it's ready for the next class or the next student that's going to use it. Now, if the wheels get really, really dirty, or you have a lot of water in here and the sponge isn't going to work, our wheel troughs actually come apart. Also, if you're perhaps maybe the last class of the day, they're a little tricky though. So that's why, if you can just clean them as is, that's the best. But basically you just use a little force, you pull them apart like this, and then you can take this whole side of the trough to the slop bucket and get out any of the sediment, then take these to the sink and clean them, okay? Now putting them back together is a little tricky. So what I'd like you to do is just wash them, then bring them back to the wheel head and just set them for Miss New, and I will put them together. I can kind of show you what that looks like, but they're kind of hard to pop together. You have to use a little bit of force. Okay, now it's together. So I just find that it's easier for me to do it. Set them here clean, and I will put them together for you. All right, guys, well, I know this video was a little bit longer, but this is the basics of how to throw on the wheel. I would encourage you to go on YouTube and find other videos about how to do beginning wheel throwing. There's all kinds of great videos out there, and do some education for yourself so that you're ready for your turn on the wheel. So please let me know if you have any questions as we get into this unit. I'm happy to help you, and have fun with this project, you guys. It's really fun to finally be trying the wheel.